Welcome to another interesting episode of Logistics with Purpose. My name is Enrique Alvarez, and I have Kristi as my co-host as always. Kristi, how are you doing today?
I am really good. I'm currently outside of Cleveland. It is about 16 degrees outside with about 7 inches of snow, and it's a beautiful day to sit inside in the heating and just enjoy the views, much like the one our guest has behind her today. And we were thrilled to have this conversation. Big fans of the brand. So this is Annie Agle. She is VP of Impact and Sustainability at Cotopaxi. So if you are familiar with Cotopaxi at all, then you know impact and sustainability is a huge part of their brand, one of the reasons we love them. And so we're excited to have this conversation. So Annie, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Kristi and Enrique. It's an honor.
It is a delight to have you here. We've been communicating by email for a while, so I'm glad to see you face to face a little bit at this point. And before we get into your terrific background and obviously all the wonderful things that Cotopaxi does, I want to ask you some quick questions. No
Sure.
pressure, just respond with the first thing that comes to your mind.
Sure.
So, early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Favorite book?
Hard, but probably Dante's Divine Comedy.
Oh, okay. That's a one that doesn't come up often. Um, Something you cannot live without.
My family.
Good. And favorite place to be?
Wherever I am at that moment.
Oh,
Live in
good.
the present.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of those answers with us and our audience. And Annie, thank you again for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. Before we jump into your career and all the amazing things Cotopaxi is doing, just tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us a little bit more about your background, where you grew up, your childhood.
Sure. I grew up mostly in Park City, Utah. I was born and raised in Park City, so I spent a lot of time growing up in the mountains, which was fantastic with my family. So everyone in my family skis, and I had the opportunity to learn to ski from a very young age. I'm not sure what came first, learning to ski or learning to walk. So I think my earliest ski pass was literally my dad holding me at 6 months. So I've been on skis my whole life. I love climbing, just being outside in general. I'm also autistic, so I'm definitely a huge nerd. I like everything from Dungeons and Dragons to reading, and wish I'd kind of figured out that puzzle earlier in life. That was definitely pretty fundamental to my experience of the world. And so I try to speak up about my neurodivergence and other folks who are wired like me. Also had the opportunity to do some of my education in France, just in public school in France, which was a really amazing opportunity to learn to speak another culture, cultural language, and just have the opportunity to immerse myself in a different country and have that international perspective. And
Good skiing in France as well, isn't it?
yeah, Chamonix is amazing. Chamonix is amazing. Had some opportunity to spend quite a bit of time in the Berner Oberland in Switzerland as well over the summers. My dad's a quite accomplished mountaineer and has done really big mountain climbing, everyone from Aconcagua in Argentina to Oyu and in Tibet. So grew up in a whole impressive family of outdoors people, and that was a huge part of my experience of the world and a huge reason why I got into sustainability because I saw firsthand the disappearance of glaciers. In Utah, we have the largest living organism called Pando, which is a huge collection of over 40,000 aspen trees with one root system. And unfortunately, because the frosts aren't sufficient enough to kill all the molds that naturally live on leaves, we've started to see a decrease in the health of that organism. And just in lieu of spending time outdoors, I've seen very intimately the change associated with climate change, things like biodiversity loss that are hugely concerning and not always at the top of mind for others, which I understand not everyone has that access to the outdoors, which makes it really easy to stand up for the outdoors, but not everyone has that access.
Wow, that's amazing. And such a personal perspective. I feel like we've all read stats, but seeing it happen in front of your eyes and seeing it lived out is a completely different experience. So thank you. You touched on so many interesting things. So I'm not sure how you're going to answer this question, but I'm excited for it. So looking back, what's a story from your early years that shaped who you are and what you do now?
There's so many I could tell.
Oh.
But I think one was actually when I was growing up, I remember my dad allowing me to belay him for the first time. And I couldn't have been older than 10. And there was a new belay device called the Gree, which allowed for that to happen regardless of weight disparities. And I really learned responsibility through climbing and problem solving. I remember in that moment understanding that I was actually responsible for my father's life. But I think there's so many incredible growth parallels between climbing um, and solving problems. I think in chaos and in uncomfortable situations in the climbing community, we have this term called type 2 fun, which is the kind of fun that's not fun in the moment because it's really hard and challenging and it takes a lot of grit and resilience. But when you're through those kinds of type 2 scenarios, you feel like a galvanized, kind of polished, lighter version of yourself, having really been tested. And so I think about that a lot. And even with life, sometimes you go through type 2 moments in life, and you, in that moment, right, nothing's fun, everything's challenging. You feel like you are too exposed to risk. There's just a lot of frustration, a lot of exhaustion. And I think those moments have always given me kind of perspective. Right now, I think in America we're in a type 2 situation, right? And so, how do you actually just lean into that reality and understand it for what it is, but find calm in that chaos and a sense of resilience and perseverance. And so I think that just there's so many experiences like that, but I'll never forget that moment when my dad as a kid gave me that responsibility and that trust, and just knowing that there's no way I was going to let him down. I was going to be there for him. And I think those kinds of moments that really test you and really wake you up to life, I think are something that just stay with you for forever.
Wow, I feel
Wow,
like
thank you so much.
a TED
Yeah.
talk or a book waiting to happen. I feel like I'm on the brink of something that just happened.
Well, absolutely. And I think you're right on the way you put it, like just life in general and what we're all going through right now, just having that attitude and looking at it as a type 2 type of scenario where you can come out a better person, and we can come out a better country, and we can come out a better community. And I think that's a beautiful way of actually putting this, because type 2 moments are then important and needed, right, to continue to improve ourselves and improve our communities around us. And so thanks for bringing it up. That's really, really cool way of putting it. Now, going back to you, you graduated from Barnard College at Columbia University, right? And you did Bachelor of Arts. And then you also went on and completed a Master's of Science and Sustainability at the University of Cambridge, which before we started recording, you mentioned it's the first, I guess, program like that in the world. So tell us a little bit more about your experience, first as a Bachelor of Arts, and then having completed this sustainability masters, and what do you learn, and how do you jump from one to the other?
Sure. I always say I sort of tripped and fell and aimed my fall in the general direction of sustainability. Sustainability didn't really exist when I went to school, and I was kind of a strange scenario. Again, autism led me in a lot of different directions. So I minored in chemistry, which I initially had thought I wanted to major in, but didn't want to work in a lab, didn't want to work for DuPont. Quickly discovered that that wasn't really the career that I wanted. And then double majored in English and military history, really wanting to kind of understand international politics and international scenarios. And I was really blessed that in my junior year, I found my way onto a sort of research role for a leading human rights NGO operating in the Middle East at the height of the sort of chaotic occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq. And so saw a lot of life, a lot of the world very quickly. There were a lot of scenarios there that I encountered. One of the things that I analyzed as part of this really amazing organization was looking at patterns in things like terrorism. And one of the things we discovered was that one of the reasons ISIS, the Islamic State, was able to gain so much power so quickly wasn't just because it weaponized oil and energy and fossil fuels, but also it managed to make a land grab, very successful land grab of all of the natural water aquifers in the entire Syrian region. So one of the first instances of the weaponization of water really leveraging climate change dynamics to the detriment of defense and security globally. So a lot of lessons learned there, a lot of really challenging casework, particularly with regards to women's rights, things like honor killings and female genital mutilation, and lots of really, really challenging topics that grew me up pretty quick. I'm really grateful for those experiences, but to be honest now, my most stressful day on the job now is just like, it's just nothing. I'm like, listen, business goes up, business goes down. Sometimes you have a good week, sometimes you have a bad week, but I'm not working with human lives anymore. Which is a good perspective to have. And then, I always just tried to have a growth mindset and was really pleased to find myself at Cotopaxi after working a little bit in finance and a little bit in consulting, having had the opportunity of really just a huge variety of experiences, really looking at all of the ways in which sustainability kind of shows up in society and in the business environment, which was a really amazing experience to have, and then was really ready to be at a company where leadership was values consistent with me. And Davis just really blew me away. I initially started at Cotopaxi as a consultant, helping them with a B Corporation recertification, and then I just refused to leave. So now I've been
Nice.
here for 7 years. They
That's
can
one way to get a job. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's been really lovely and was really fortunate to kind of be one of many pilgrims who go to a place like Cambridge where you're just sort of overwhelmed by the density of human knowledge that's been achieved and pursued at an institution like that, and really just wanted to refine my understandings and work on the areas where I had weaker understandings around topics like things like biodiversity loss and water issues, and really have a network of people, even if topics arose, which always do in sustainability, that you're not very familiar with, knowing someone in your network who has deep knowledge of that. So it was a really amazing experience. I've been very blessed with the career path that I've been allowed to walk.
Yeah, for sure.
Congratulations. Yes,
Yeah.
and I'm sure, yeah, I can hardly wait for all the things that you'll still have to go through and you'll accomplish in the next couple of years. So,
Cotopaxi's every day we're working towards something, a better
yep.
future every day. So I'm so blessed with the team that I get to work with now, that just the character of the people on the Cotopaxi team are second to none.
That's awesome. Well, I want to talk more about Cotopaxi, of course, but before we do that, I want to back up and talk a little bit about your neurodiversity. So if it doesn't impact us each personally, we know someone who is neurodivergent. So first, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about just the topic in general. And it sounds like it's kind of become a superpower for you. So kind of what you've learned through that and taken away and how that's helped you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm both autistic and I have ADHD, so there's a lot of overlap between issues and topics like ADHD and more traditional autism, which was referred to as Asperger's before it was kind of renamed. Um, and I self-diagnosed using the Cambridge University test. It's one of the reasons I chose to do my master's there, is actually that was the first time I tested
Oh.
myself for autism and tested positive. And I remember starting to read about that test and just was overwhelmed. It was one of the most transformative moments of my life. I was 26. I remember exactly where I was. And just for that first time feeling like, oh, maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe there wasn't something wrong with me. Maybe my wiring was just really different. So I think for many people, autism was extremely challenging growing up. For me, in a lot of ways, I was just very different in a way that didn't make sense to me. Nothing interested me that interested normal girls my age. I had no interest in dating. I had no interest in sort of social systems around me, like I just would get really hyper fixated on different topics that I would just want to read about and just go down and down and down and down and just research. Like I've always just been the kind of person, like I just consume information. I just love reading. I love learning things. There's nothing more exciting to me than learning. And that's one of the things I love about the sustainability space is because constant learning is actually what makes you good in this space. When people say I'm a sustainability expert, I'm like, I don't even know what that means. For me, that's like claiming you're an expert at being a good
Right.
person. I think humility and curiosity go a lot farther than expertise or traditional
Right.
expertise in this space. I think it's a collective effort. Um, and I'd say for now, autism is part superpower, part disability. Sometimes it's really challenging. My social anxiety and depression have been very bad. And I've definitely needed to lean all the way into behavioral and mental health support networks. It can be really challenging. Um, Last year, I was actually able to do genetic testing. There's now a genetic test for autism and ADHD that also tests you genetically against 150 plus of the most common uh, psych medications. And so that was incredibly liberating to just see on a piece of paper, oh, I'm at a 55% impairment for serotonin production. Like I make 55% less happy and calming chemistry than your average person. And actually just seeing that when I've had a bad day and I'm just anxious for no good reason and just feel like I haven't been able to manage that through healthy coping mechanisms, it's really helpful to see that paper. And so when I talk about resources, I do recommend that folks who think they are on the spectrum do a self-test. Chances are that's going to be pretty accurate. The Cambridge test is literally free. You can Google it. That's a great way of self-evaluating, and then you can get tested. It's challenging. It's expensive to do that. So look at the other nonprofits out there to see if you qualify for some assistance, because I know it can be really challenging, and our healthcare systems are obviously overwhelmed by requests like this. And then work with your psychiatrist and your therapist to get the diagnoses that you need. And responsible medication certainly plays a role. Um, and just know that you need resources, right? Clinical therapy, if you're on the spectrum, if you have neurodivergence, you should see those things as potentially life-saving, right? Therapy for you isn't optional. I'm going to go ahead and say that most traditional therapy might not work for you. Look for clinical therapy. I'd say that's a common theme for people on the spectrum who have received good care, it's because it was clinical. They were working with a therapist and a psychiatrist who really understood autism and understood ADHD and can really help explain that to you, because chances are no one's ever really sat down with you and be like, this is how your brain works. This is how it's different. This is likely some of the antisocial behaviors that may or may not have cropped up, and here's what we're going to do about it. And so clinical therapy, clinical help is really important. So get the care that you need.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your honesty and authenticity there. I appreciate it so much.
Well, thanks for asking about it. I'm happy to share. I think it's a really important topic and one I feel passionate about trying to speak up about, because it can be really challenging to
Well, I have no doubt that people will hear what you just heard and it will help people out there. So thank you for that. I do, of course, want to talk about all the exciting things you're doing now. So as you talked about, you were a consultant that wouldn't let go, and they're lucky to have you now. And so, leading impact and sustainability. First, for anybody out there who has not managed to hear about this amazing brand called Cotopaxi, will you talk a little bit about the mission and your products, and then your specific responsibilities?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I have the best job in the world, let me tell you. The team at Cotopaxi is just phenomenal. And I think for anyone who really oversees sustainability, the most important thing you need to do is democratize sustainability successfully. And that has been easy to do at Cotopaxi because every single one of our employees is a good person who wants to show up in the right way for others, not just for themselves. There's a lot of humility and a lot of team spirit at Cotopaxi that I haven't found anywhere else. So I oversee our sustainability and impact. As I mentioned, I've been here for 7 years, so I've gotten to do everything from start our corporate foundation, which has helped over 4.3 million people living in poverty. The company, I can't take any credit for this, our amazing two co-founders, Davis Smith and Stefan Jacob, set up the company to really try to solve extreme poverty in our lifetimes. They didn't see that business was really going after this first sustainable development goal, and we're extremely concerned about this growing divide of haves and have-nots and this enormous growth in terms of economic disparity that we're seeing in America and everywhere else. So really, our company is set up to try to solve for that, which is a really unique value proposition. And in the meantime, we've really tried to solve for the fact that the textile and apparel industry in general has quite ruinous consequences on people and planet. There's a lot of inequality baked into how supply chains operate in the apparel sector, and obviously a lot of catastrophic environmental impacts that the apparel industry has, particularly with the acceleration of these instant fashion companies like Shein and Temu. So we really try to actively solve for that, and all of our products now at least have one very strong sustainability feature that can be anything from using recycled inputs to what we're really known for, which is using dead stock, which is leftover fabric that was made but not used. And so we're sitting on enough existing fabric to clothe, by most estimations, the next 9 generations of humans. So there's really not any need for producing virgin fabric, right? A lot of that just ends up in incineration. A lot of it comes from plastics, which comes from fossil fuels. So you're literally burning fossil fuels in a really inefficient manner when that goes into an incinerator, or more frequently landfill. So we really try to design from what already exists, and if at all possible, design from our own waste. We have a few upcycled collections that we're trying to expand the frequency of. So we really, I feel very blessed to work with the design and sourcing teams at Cotopaxi. They're phenomenal professionals who are designing and making clothes in a pretty different way from how the rest of the sector operates. And we're not perfect, right? We still exist within those systems that still have a lot of excess and inequality baked in. But we do feel that when we're in those systems, we're hoping to show that we can operate differently, and really also try to think about how business transformation can look in the apparel sector. How do we really, really continue to lean into upcycling and really closing the loop in terms of using everything that we make, just making sure that those resources are kept in continuous uses.
Yeah, well, and
Wow.
it's so like the signature Cotopaxi is colorful, lots of different color fabrics used together for backpacks and bags and coats and all kinds of things. So it is amazing how you're kind of using leftovers, but it's become like the thing that people love and know you for is just the colorful, beautiful aspects of the fabrics and everything. So you came from sustainability somewhat to background, somewhat your career path. You've learned a ton along the way. And I love what you said about calling yourself an expert or anything like that. But I'm curious about the evolution of sustainability efforts over the last decade. What are some things that you think the industry has gotten right?
I'm actually going to start with what I think the industry got wrong,
Okay.
right? Because I do think now's a good time for the sustainability space to think on how it needs to change. There are a few things that I think we got too obsessed with. One is a linear temperature increase, right? This is a bit taboo to say, and we've set our own science-based targets, and we will continue to do this. But climate change was never a linear issue. It was a systemic issue that impacts everything from human health to biodiversity loss and species loss, as well as volatility in weather events, right? And I think one of the things we did a poor job explaining to the rest of population was that climate change impacts everyone. The way we see sustainability topics impacting human health in our sector is numerous, right? A lot of the chemistry that is in clothes is stuff you should never be wearing next to your skin, literally never. It's disrupting fertility, it's cancer causing, right? You would not believe the things that go into products made by brands like Shein and Temu, right? There's lead in there, truly. Like South Korea did a big health study on Shein and Temu products and basically found several toxic chemicals in most every single product that they tested as part of that research. So I think that's one thing that could have been explained better that would have allowed people, at least in America, to engage around this topic in a more personal way, is understanding that things like coal that's burned or fossil fuels that go in traditional car engines end up in your lungs. They end up in your digestive tract, right? These are things that shave 5 years off of your life. And so not correlating, I think, some of these sustainability topics to human sustainability was something that I wish had been done a little bit better. The second, and I say this also as a business, this linear temperature increase. I mean, at the Paris Agreement, by all means, let's do that. But we need to understand that a linear temperature increase is the least of our problems. What we're actually increasing is the volatility of a finite climate system in which we live and exist as humans. And so when we're talking about biodiversity loss, we're also talking about really important inputs that go into life-saving pharmaceuticals, right? Marine life. There's a lot of marine life inputs that go into life-saving medications whose raw material inputs are now threatened, right? I mean, again, I think people don't understand how to care about climate. And so that's something we're really trying to focus on at Cotopaxi is keeping this conversation a little bit more optimistic, but also relating it back to people, right? And so a lot of how we interpret climate and solve for climate at Cotopaxi is also solving for our mission of poverty, right? And we know that climate change now is one of the leading causes of global poverty. There's massive weather event disruptions that we're seeing everywhere, obviously everywhere from California to North Carolina to places in which all of our manufacturing exists, like Vietnam, like Taiwan, like Philippines. We're seeing typhoon after typhoon in ways that just can't be tracked. And so relating this back to the business community of saying, hey, caring about climate is just doing your fiduciary responsibility. People like DHL, which is not a radical leftist organization, predicts $1 trillion in loss by 2030 due to climate change disruptions of the supply chains, right? And so I think really relating this back in a way that people can understand who are maybe climate skeptical, that's kind of a goal of mine during the next 4 years for obvious reasons.
That's awesome.
Wow, thank you so much. There are so many things to unpack there and so much information, but it makes sense, right? You look at climate and you see poverty, and most people might think that they're completely separate, but at the end of the day, as you say, we probably had not done a good job relating the two, and they're intricately, I mean, they're very related one to each other. So thank you for bringing that up and for mentioning it out loud. Annie, so shifting a little bit to gear for good. That's kind of Cotopaxi's kind of commitment to sustainability by design, and the fact that you guys are making durable products and you support that, and then you use that revenue to support some of the communities. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges that brands like you, well, and I guess before we get into that, what brands are like you? Because you guys are pretty unique, it seems like, and in general, I feel like there's not a lot of brands that are upholding the well-being of the planet and ourselves as humans as you do. But what other brands are there that are as committed or somewhat as committed as you? And then, of course, what are some of the challenges that some of the other clothing brands face right now?
Sure. I mean, I'd say in general, the outdoor industry, there are a lot of really fantastic brands, and there's a lot of really amazing efforts that take place across the entire spectrum of companies that make up the outdoor industry. I think a lot of people who work for those companies have also, like me, spent a lot of time in the outdoors. And obviously, our business sort of depends on nature being accessible and being beautiful and pristine and having snow ski. You can't sell ski clothes without having
Right.
ski seasons, right? So
Right.
I think the outdoor industry in general, we have some great partners, and I think the collaboration and the collaborative spirit that we have in the outdoor industry is really amazing. Like we do have Patagonia. I think REI as well. REI's climate program is exceptional. I think the people who make up their sustainability program are really exceptional human beings. And we collaborate with them a lot in the supply chain through the Outdoor Industry Association, which is a real model for how industry associations could work to advance the interests of people and planet, not just limited shareholder capitalism. I think, OIA does really fantastic work, and through them, we've been able to collaborate to, facilitate a clean heat transition across shared sustainable fabric facilities, to help our tier one suppliers, our cut-sew suppliers transition to renewables. So there's a lot of really amazing collaboration across the outdoor sector. I'd also say outside of it, Eileen Fisher is an exceptional company. I think they've been at the forefront of sustainability and circularity efforts. She's been a real moral leader, I think. Reformation is another brand I really enjoy. Aloha's, which has really pioneered the, made to order model to kind of combat a lot of the inventory excess that always occurs in apparel. I think Allbirds is really fantastic. There are a lot of amazing B Corps like ourselves. So I think there are some good companies out there. It's just unfortunate that, I definitely do think there's been some huge pushback that companies have faced with this administration change that's challenging to navigate for a lot of companies. But I also think it's going to be a real opportunity to see who's truly committed to these efforts. So we'll see.
Type 2 moment, as you said, right?
Yep, type 2 moment.
Type 2 moment. We'll keep pushing, and then we'll be better off on the other end.
Yep.
Absolutely. We mentioned you're a B Corp and that you actually helped with the certification. That was my role as well. It's been so fun to meet other B Corps and learn from them. Everybody has such a wealth of knowledge and such interesting backgrounds. And even as someone who's followed Cotopaxi for a long time, even just hearing you talk about sustainable development goal number 1 about no poverty and how that plays into your mission. Utterly fascinating. And thank you for breaking that down. That explained it in a whole new way for me as a fan of the brand. I'm curious about your own benefits and challenges that you've experienced with B Corp. So what have you learned from the community? What has been more difficult, or what are you, obviously the standards are changing soon too. So any excitement or concern about that?
Listen, I think B Corp has generally done a really good job evolving. I think that no certification stays as is, and I think it's really important to adapt to reality as it goes forth. That's a really important aspect of functional sustainability is it adaptable? Because realities change, right? We're living in a very different reality quite suddenly, right? And so I think that B Corp has done a good job adapting. I also think the true strength of the B Corp certification is that it always gives you something to improve on. It really gives you this laundry list after every certification that you go through of things that you should work on, things that you can take away and give to different teams. And I also really like B Corp because it truly measures everything, right? It measures, as you well know, right? It measures governance, it measures living wage, it measures supply chain dynamics and human rights, it measures employee benefits and time off and paternity leave. I mean, it really measures everything, which is incredible to have as a sustainability leader because it really allows me to go to every team in our company and they understand how this holistic sustainability, right? This holistic sustainability that plays upon the founding definition of sustainability, which is, you guys know, but I think many people don't know, the original academic definition of sustainability is meeting the needs of today's generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs, right? There's nothing that mentions environment, right? We can't just treat sustainability as climate. It really needs to be a much more holistic approach. And so I think that's the true strength of the B Corp certification, is that it really allows you to democratize how you think about sustainability, and every team can really engage around that certification and that path of constant improvement. I think the problem with B Corp is obviously it takes a lot of effort to just do the assessment. I think in general, our department has definitely gotten pretty inundated by reporting requirements, right? We get so many requests, particularly from wholesale partners around the world, who need our reporting so that they can do their reporting in Europe and Canada and elsewhere. So as we've expanded internationally, there's just a lot of reporting that we need to do now. And I don't think we can report our way out of, a poverty crisis, out of a climate crisis. So I do hope there's more standardization in reporting. And in my ideal world, the B Corp certification and that assessment, I would be able to use that to meet all of my other reporting requirements, because it's just the lack of standardization around that topic has been very challenging.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, no, and really, really good comment and good suggestions. And you're right. The good thing is, and the one thing that I would like to say as before I ask you the next question is that auto diagnosis or the assessment that you can conduct if anyone's listening to us and listening to this conversation. If you are not a B Corp certified company, but you're actually trying to see how good you are in terms of all these different dimensions that Annie was talking about, just take the assessment. It's a pretty good assessment, and that will actually be a very good way of facing the reality of your company, of your startup, you don't have to be the owner of the company. You just have to go ahead and take the assessment and see where you guys fall, because there's always room for improvement. That's for sure. Annie, so Cotopaxi's, of course, name is inspired by Mount Cotopaxi, and for everyone that is listening or watching this on YouTube, your background is Mount Cotopaxi, a picture that you took, and it's beautiful. Cotopaxi Mountain is in Ecuador. And I know that you guys have a lot of things, a good foundation, and you do a lot of really good programs in Ecuador to try to help people in Ecuador that have actually gone through a lot, right? Drought and wildfires near Quito, and this train of the cartel activity that's starting, and refugees. I mean, it's a complex country, also a somewhat impoverished country as well. So how has the Cotopaxi Foundation, in partnership with Global Giving, supported the local organizations? And what can you tell us about your foundation?
Sure. So broadly speaking, we give 1% of revenue, and it has to be 1%. That can't be redefined as something less than that. There's actually an agreement that holds the corporation Cotopaxi accountable for this, but we give 1% of revenue to the Cotopaxi Foundation. And the Cotopaxi Foundation uses MIT Poverty Action Lab data to really determine how we give. And so the three big buckets we give to, because there's so much evidence that these three buckets are the ones that really deliver systemic relief for poverty, are education, health, and livelihoods. And so we really see Ecuador as the tip of the spear, because we are named Cotopaxi. We feel very strongly that we have a real opportunity to invest in Ecuador and to do everything in our power to alleviate the systemic problems that Ecuadorians are facing. So we have many grassroots organizations and larger organizations that we support in Ecuador and have done for 10 years now. So we've been focused on alleviating pressures from the Venezuelan refugee crisis, which is ongoing and obviously has displaced millions of people, more so than, by some estimates, any other refugee crisis of the last 10 years. I think it's important that sometimes it seems to me that issues that occur in South America and Latin America typically get overlooked for whatever reason. It's a less focus. I don't know, there seems to be less international focus on issues that arise in the region. And so we're very focused on South America and Latin America in general. And so we support everything from collective regenerative coffee manufacturing in Ecuador. That's been a huge economic boon for Colombia, and Ecuador has really struggled to get its coffee and chocolate production up to speed. So that's something we've invested in to help hopefully generate income and jobs in a new industry that where there's a lot of potential for economic growth. We've also supported things like malaria bed nets to indigenous tribes around the Amazon. As you probably know, Enrique, obviously Ecuador is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. So it really has everything from the Andes and the Cotopaxi region to really dense, beautiful, pristine virgin jungle in the eastern part of the country. But there's a huge issue with malaria spread with the advancement of climate change that has gone unaddressed in the region. Obviously, malaria numbers have been unstable in Ecuador. And we found that, for example, malaria treatment is actually one of the leading causes of family bankruptcy, and also really prevents children from attending school. Children are the worst victims of malaria. And if you get malaria as a child, chances are you don't complete your education. And so it's one of the many reasons we invest in healthcare and particularly in preventive healthcare, because actually the link between healthcare disasters and family poverty is really direct and immediate. And so it's one of the reasons and one of the examples we give for why we align with MIT's Poverty Action Lab findings, because that's not an obvious investment you would make if you wanted to solve poverty. Like malaria doesn't seem like an obvious investment, but actually it's one of the best investments you can make to prevent cycles of poverty from taking hold. So we do many sort of sponsored activities in Ecuador. You can find out more about them on our website, cotopaxi.com. You can read about all of our fantastic partners in that country, in Ecuador proper and regionally, but definitely very
Thank you.
focused on Latin America.
Amazing. Really incredible, and such much like your own background, so wide, so deep, so just fascinating to listen to. I hope more people who listen to this episode have you come and speak to them, because you're really good at like making the case as well as like showing the connectivity of it all. I love the phrase democratizing sustainability. So thank you. I feel like a much smarter person
Thank you so
coming out of
much.
today's conversation.
Oh, I
Um,
appreciate it.
we love what you're doing, love Cotopaxi. Obviously, you cover a lot of things. So what are some of the future plans for Cotopaxi? What can we expect to see?
I think we're really focused on decarbonization, particularly across supply chains, as well as human rights welfare. So that's something we're just feeling the need to be more active about. I had the opportunity to address the UN Human Rights Commission in Geneva last year, of just saying that I'm really concerned that human rights have not really gotten better in apparel supply chains. It's still a huge issue. Cotopaxi is among all the brands out there who can't claim that our products don't have human rights abuses attached to them, right? That's unacceptable. And so there really needs to be a different approach to this auditing system. Like we can truly look any reporter or any customer in the face and say, we're doing everything that can be done. Like we're doing all of the things that are recommended for a company to do around engaging around human rights. It's not enough. It's not been enough. That's the thing that keeps me up at night, and we need different levels of collaboration. We really need companies to come together and work with governments, because human rights responsibilities ultimately lie with governments. And so US corporations, Western corporations, I think instead of just focusing on all of these auditing measures, we need to engage as a collective with governments to say, hey, this is just not acceptable. It's just not okay. It's not okay that there's predatory recruitment happening, that, the vast majority of seafood comes from male slave labor, that In Cutso factories and dormitories, women aren't seeing their families. They have no opportunity for dating. They have no opportunity for skills advancement. It just needs to be done differently. And so I think that's the part we haven't gotten to yet. And there needs to be a much more honest conversation, I think, about workers and who's actually delivering our economies of scales. Um, right? It's just not acceptable how massive parts of the human population who realize and make products are not benefiting from those returns at all, right? That needs to be adjusted. And I do think we're really living in a moment of climate crisis, but also crisis of inequality. Wealth inequality is something that just needs to be solved for much more proactively. And this is a nonpartisan issue, right? And so that's something we will continue to plant our flag around, is just saying, hey, inequality, the inequality that we're living with right now, it can't continue. Something needs to be done about it. And using corporate advocacy is a huge part of where we see ourselves spending our time the next 4 years. And from a place of optimism, not picking fights or calling people out, right? But really trying to provide space for people to come together and activate around what feels fair and what is actually sustainable.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Annie. It's been an incredible interview, and thank you so much for being such an honest, straightforward, inspiring individual. So thank you for being you, and thank you for being at Cotopaxi. I'm sure that that could be a great company for you to continue growing, and then also bring this coalition of other companies so we can together, including us and everyone else that's listening, this interview, we could change policy, because I believe, as you pointed out, that's kind of the thing that really can move the needle.
Yep, we need
So policy, yes, go ahead. I mean,
that's
close
I was
close
just
the
gonna say
show
we
for
need
us.
policy. Policy is like
We
what
need
to
policy. All
happen.
right.
We need better standardization of efforts. I think we need more companies to come together, like-minded brands to come together. We need to activate our customers in ways that make sense too, allowing them to participate in conversations that corporations can kind of force to happen.
Perfect. So, and again, you heard it, Annie at Cotopaxi, come together. I think we have a pretty good excuse for doing that. We all share the same planet, and I don't think anyone's leaving anytime soon. So thank you once again. Annie, where can our listeners kind of contact you, just get in touch with you, or Cotopaxi?
I'm Annie Agle, Agle at LinkedIn, and that's kind of my only active social account. And then Cotopaxi is Cotopaxi, Cotopaxi.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This was a terrific conversation. And again, thank you for helping us democratize sustainability, as well as I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning of talking about how we have not done a good enough job of tying it to other issues, of tying it to our daily lives. So thank you for the advocacy that you bring and the words that you're out there spreading and the positive messages. We appreciate it so much. And thank you to everyone for listening in again or watching. Again, if you are listening, go look at the YouTube video and look at Annie's amazing background in her photo of Cotopaxi, and get outside and do something good for somebody else. But thanks so much for listening. We'll have another amazing episode in 2 weeks, and we appreciate all of your time and your contribution to Logistics with Purpose. Have a good day.
Thanks so much for having me.